Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Councillor Theo Buck-Philip, Chair of the Human Resources Committee of Somerset Council, and I'm Chair of this committee in my capacity as Executive Lead Member of Transformation and Human Resources. This committee has powers delegated to it by full council in the area of human resources. The committee meets as and when required and will report as necessary to full council. It's worth noting that the principal functions of the HR committee are to determine, monitor, review and amend staffing policies and practices to secure the best use and development of the council's staff, including the power to deal with all matters relating to staff terms and conditions. The agenda and papers have been published on the council website in advance of the meeting. Today's meeting will be run using a hybrid format with committee members and key officers physically present at County Hall. Other elected members and officers may physically or remotely join the meeting to speak on specific agenda items or to observe. Council will be making an audio recording of the meeting to assist with the recording of our discussions. Can I quickly further highlight the following to enable the meeting to run smoothly? Please only use the chat function for agenda items and or to indicate that you wish to speak. Please don't assume that I will be reading the chat because I don't have it on my computer. Please only speak at my invitation and please say your name before speaking to enable people both in and out of the room to know who's speaking at any time. Please remember to turn off microphones and cameras when not speaking. There is a facility in MS Teams under the ellipsis button called Turn on Live Captions, which provides subtitles on the screen should any of you wish to use them. Right, item 1, apologies for absence. Laura.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Andy Kendall and apologies from Councillor Graham Oates, which we have Councillor Henry Hobhouse substituting for, and apologies from Councillor Lee Redman.
And also we have Councillor Mike Stanton joining us online. Good. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any additional interests to update us with? No. Good. Item 3, the minutes of the last meeting held on the 11th of July 2023. Note the minutes. Do we have any corrections to the minutes? As a no. Do we have a proposer for the minutes? Proposed Councillor Sarah Wakefield. Do we have a seconder? Seconded Councillor Emily Pearlston. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions?
I wasn't here.
Thank you. Clearly carried.
Well done.
Clearly carried by those who were here at the time. Item 4, public question time. I have not been notified of any public questions. I cannot see any members of the public, so I'm assuming we don't have any questions. Very good. Item 5, the approval process for Somerset Council health and safety policies. So I'm going to invite Daniel Thomas, who is Somerset Council's Health and Safety Service Manager, to give a presentation and introduce the Health and Safety Service and provide a background and overview of the work undertaken before we consider his report and the various policies. Daniel, I can see you online. There you are. Welcome, Daniel. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Daniel Thomas, Strategic Manager for Health and Safety. Nice to see you all. If it's okay, I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, I always start at the main intranet page because I think it's a lot more useful than putting links in the chat, and it helps people navigate to where they need to go. So our health and safety site is one of the main intranet sites that you can find here. We've done a lot of work over the last 6 months to really increase our digital presence and to make sure that we've got robust measures in place for managing health and safety within the council, so specifically looking at the governance structure. And today is somewhat of a milestone for the health and safety service. Towards the end of 2022, the Health and Safety Wellbeing Steering Group, so the Council's Central Health and Safety Committee for discussing health and safety items and wellbeing across the council, discussed the fact that actually the steering group themselves played a role in the review of health and safety policies, but didn't necessarily see the steering group as formally ratifying them within the council. And that created a bit of a gap as to where we would get them approved. So it was agreed that we would bring them to yourselves once they'd been through a review process. So all policies for the new council have been looked at by representatives, health and safety representatives from all 5 predecessor organisations. We've used the legacy county councils as a continuing authority as the starting point, and then we've done a baseline comparison against legacy district council policies. In doing so, once we've drafted policies, we've also taken them to the LGR JNF group for consultation with trade unions, and also we've taken them to the Health and Safety Wellbeing Steering Group, which has representatives from all 7 directorates across the council. In some cases, that's service directors. In other cases, it's senior managers, such as strategic managers from the organisation. And Councillor Theo also attended the most recent meeting. Now, as part of the review process, it does take quite a while to get here. We've got roughly a 13-week process, and we'll sort of drag that across for you to see. We've got a forward plan that I'll show you in a moment. Officers are aware of the policies that they need to work on. When a policy is submitted to me for review, there's a 2-week holding period for my review. There's then a further 2 weeks for the officer responsible to action any changes to the policy before it's then submitted to the Wellbeing Steering Group and our colleagues in the LGR JNF group. Following that, there's another 2-week holding period for us to action any changes before we write a policy report and request sign off from the required signatories. So it's just a very, and then it goes to yourselves and the HR committee. So a very, very quick overview of the process. Now, I did say that we've worked quite hard in terms of our digital presence and what we've been doing with governance. And that's evident if we scroll down our main site. We've got our important links. We've got the health and safety governance link. If we go into that, we've got the Health Safety Wellbeing Steering Group, which I've already referred to, and then we've got a series of health safety wellbeing boards, which are in the process of, some of them are meeting for the first time this month. What does that actually look like? You can see the dates as well that these groups are meeting. But what does that actually look like? Well, this is a point where everybody squints, and I feel sorry for those sat at the back. So I will zoom in. But we've got our corporate leadership team. And then we've got the Health and Safety Wellbeing Steering Group. We are seeing some branching here, of course, and that's why we're here today for the HR committee. And then we've got the series of boards that I've alluded to. And then we do also capture senior management team meetings and service level team meetings, and that overall flow of information related to health, safety and wellbeing throughout the organisation. I must stress that we've made wellbeing intrinsic with the work that we've done, absolutely. And there is a wellbeing board, which I'll touch on in a moment. And then there is a little bit of a steer as well, and I won't go into any great detail, but it is there for you to view. There's a bit of a steer on the likely topical items that would be discussed within these various meeting groups. But I will, as I said, just zoom in for a moment. So we've got the Community Services, Health, Safety and Wellbeing Board. I believe they're meeting next week on the 18th. We've got the Strategy, Workforce and Localities, Resources and Corporate Services, Health, Safety, Wellbeing Board. I'll only say that once. And they met for the first time last Monday, chaired by Oliver Woodhams. Kirsty Larkins is chairing the Climate and Place Health, Safety, Wellbeing Board. And we tried to, when we looked at the structure for the new organisation, we tried to take a little bit of best practice from each organisation. I would say particularly County, Somerset, Western Taunton and South Somerset really informed the development of this structure. And Climate and Place, well, the ECI, Economic, Community and Infrastructure Board, which Alan previously established a long time ago, Alan. That was used as a bit of an exemplar for this tier of the structure. and therefore the Climate and Place was born from the ECI meeting group, so that has sort of continued since April. Then we've got the Children's Adult Services and Public Health Safety Wellbeing Board. Then we've got a wellbeing board itself, which is really focused on the council's wellbeing strategy. Okay, and then we have schools, which is currently under development, and I'm in conversations with Amelia Walker as to what that looks like, because being pragmatic, we've got, you know, roughly, very broadly speaking, 5,000 staff in schools and 5,000 staff corporately, and what works corporately might not necessarily work for education. So Amelia and I are currently unpicking that to make sure that we've got an effective structure within the education side of our organisation. Overview of the structure, I would say that in many cases the chairs themselves attend the Health Safety Wellbeing Steering Group as well as representatives. Then we can go into one of the boards, and I think the most mature is probably the Health Safety Wellbeing Steering Group. So we've got our policy forward plan, policy, which I'll come on to in a moment. We've got various documents, so there's a draft terms of reference in there that's waiting for a review and approval from the steering group. We've got a series of, we've got a work tracker with a series of actions associated with it. We've set this up for all of the health, safety, wellbeing boards. You could say we've tried to apply a little bit of a competitive spirit to it, but what we would like to do is effectively we've put together a BI report, and as a steering group we'd like to review the activities of each individual board and make sure they're being monitored, which is what we'll be doing through the work tracker. So instead of having like a Word document with recorded actions in them, then of course we'll have minutes, but the actions will be populated into the work tracker so they're visible to all colleagues across the organisation. And you can see a version of that now of the Health Safety Governance Work Tracker, and we can run a filter to look at individual boards, or we can look at them collectively as a whole. Okay. And membership as well. All of the boards have a membership which is listed for viewing. Yeah. Okay. So that's the steering groups, but each of the individual boards has one as well. We've delivered training to the admin personnel that are supporting the boards to ensure that they're comfortable with the new processes that we're implementing, and we continue to offer that training as and when required. Now, as I say, we did question the process for having policies ratified within the local authority. But what we wanted to do is start from scratch and make sure that we had a robust, transparent arrangement in place. And therefore, we've put together a forward plan, which is, as I say, it's visible to all colleagues across the organisation. When we go into the forward plan, it's up to date at the point you go into it. I would just put a slight caveat that from time to time we might need to change the forward plan. That could be because of a change in legislation. As we mature as a new organisation, colleagues may come to us and ask for certain policies to be reviewed at a slightly quicker rate than what we've got currently populated within the forward plan. And there is also our own resourcing and priorities as well that sometimes might influence when we are able to address certain policies. Now it's a big long list, but what we can do is we can apply some quite simple filters when we're looking at it. So intended for HR committee is quite a useful one. It's a left click on the heading and then just simply filter by, and then we can look at the policies that we're here to discuss today. And we can also then look, if we wanted to, at what our current intentions are for January. We will be reviewing this within the next 2 weeks, and then we'll update Democratic Services accordingly once we feel quite confident that they are definitely going to be the policies that we'll be bringing in January. Another useful heading can be the finalised draft submitted to health and safety manager, because effectively that's when the process begins. The health and safety officer has drafted a policy, and that's when we look to start the 13-week process of getting it to the HR committee. We are trying to populate known subject matter experts as well. So where we know there's a subject matter expert within the organisation that sits outside of our team, then we're looking to engage with them. I feel that really will mature as we the boards are up and running, and we've got the information going into the steering group. Then we will be able to update it with more subject matter experts, ensuring that we're consulting with the stage well. Policy owners, so colleagues across the organisation, if they've got any points of feedback, want to discuss a particular policy with a colleague in the health and safety team, then they've got a strong steer on who the best person to approach is there. As an overview of the consultation page isn't set up. We don't have any policies. I think, as I said, in about a couple of weeks there will be, but currently we don't have any policies going through consultation. But we've set up a really nice, efficient process for consultations with the LGR-JNF group and the Health Safety Wellbeing Steering Group. Effectively, when there are policies, they can go into this area. There will then be a Microsoft form. It automatically recognises who the employee is that's providing the feedback through some quite clever robotics that's beyond my understanding. And then the employee can select a particular policy that they want to provide feedback on and provide it. And I think we've got three categories for the feedback: a change for consideration, essential change requested, and further conversation required. So that gives us an indication. We would see that if it's a suggested change, then it's our discretion. However, if an essential change is requested, then we will either look to apply the change or to discuss it further with the colleague. And an essential, a need for further conversation effectively will put the policy review on hold until we've had that conversation. And as I say, completely transparent. All colleagues across the organisation can go into this area and navigate it. We probably haven't communicated that across the organisation yet, because to some extent it is still in the early stages of development, very much in its infancy. But it's been working for us thus far. And I know that, as I said, Theo's attended the most recent Health Safety Wellbeing Steering Group meeting that we've had and was consulted as part of that overall consultation. So that probably brings us back, doesn't it, to the policies that we're here to discuss today.
Yes, before we get onto that, does anyone have any questions for at this point on any of the stuff we've just had, or shall we move on to the? Yes.
Can I just ask how we get to that screen that he's got up there now? Because I've been trying to get to the screens he's been showing. I've got to some of them, but that one I can't get to. I'm not quite sure what to type in at the top.
No, that's absolutely fine. I'll just really quickly whiz back: intranet sites, health and safety. And then we can go down to the important links: health and safety governance. And then this is the main overview page where you'll see the structure, the dates of the various meetings that are taking place. Or you can go into the page that I was just on, which is Health Safety Wellbeing Steering Group. The dates that the specific steering group meetings are taking place are populated for the whole of 2024. You can see those there. And then we've got the forward plan and policy consultation. And as I said, the tracker and the membership all on that page.
Anyway, thank you, Daniel. Yes, Faye, you've got it.
Yeah, no, I did follow that.
Same question. Okay. We're working with that. Once we've got that sorted.
It's very small.
Yes, Mandy.
I think I have to say I'm gonna have a hope of finding that page again, if I'm honest, with all those 6 or 7 behind the boxes. I think once you get past 2, probably lost most people. 2 clicks in there, finished. So just a question really on the initial sort of lovely turquoise diagram here, and the last bit of that is why we're here today, following sign-off policy report submitted to the next scheduled HR committee for approval. Going back to our terms of reference, I thought it was amend and approve. And this feels like everything we've got today is done, dusted, finished. So can I ask clarification? It's been through the process. If we have a look at the policy and there are amendments that we would like to see and suggestions, what happens then?
Well, I think we probably have
Good
to-
question.
Yes, Daniel, do you have the answer? I can improvise one. I mean, I
Sorry,
think the
my
answer is that-
connective, he's chosen a bad time to play out.
If we want some amendments, Daniel, what's the process then?
Yes. If amendments are requested, then I think we can make them. I'd probably lean on Sari to provide a steer on the approach that's taken with HR policies, because as I said, it is my first time presenting here today. I was under the impression that Democratic Services shared the approved policy report and the policies with elected members at least 2 weeks or a week, sorry, prior to this meeting. And that may constitute a review period, but I probably haven't confirmed that.
So that wasn't quite the question.
No,
If we've got them, you would always bring questions here.
Yeah.
We've discussed them. And then if there needs to be any changes, you know, my simple understanding is that councillors set policy, officers deliver that policy. So it's going back to that absolute fundamental. I just want to make sure that doesn't seem to be captured in that.
okay, sorry, or, yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to step in and just put a suggestion to you for consideration in terms of the same process that we've used for the HR policies is adopted, where we're very clear in terms of, you know, presenting which policies are brand new, which ones, and anything that's for discussion. And if there are elements that need amendment, then they go back through the process, and then depending on what that amendment is, it's either made in this committee or it needs to go back through J&F and through with the trade unions and through that process, which is the same, as I say, process that we have adopted for the HR policies. That's just a suggestion for you to consider.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue is, we'll come back to you in a second. I think the issue is that obviously much of this goes through a lot of consultation with unions, etc. And if we decide to start changing it without consulting it, that's a problem, which is why we'll probably put stuff back if you want to amend it. But
So that's why we're here and why they're coming to us. You know, if there isn't that opportunity to properly review, look at something within it that you're not comfortable with, then why are we here? To coming back to our chosen reference.
yeah,
And no change.
Yeah. And I'm sorry if I can, I think depending on the amendment, I think that's how we've dealt with the HR policies. Some of them we just agree, the amendment's agreed and it doesn't go back through a process. Some of them, yeah, because of the particular change that you as a committee have asked for, then we do take it back to the trade unions, and then we either agree that it comes back through committee again, or we agree that as a councillor, but Philip as chair of the committee can sign that off.
It'd just be nice to have that reflected in that last box, because it doesn't say anything about in your chart.
Say final review and approval.
Sorry to be picky, but we need to be here and doing what we're here to do.
I'm being equally picky. And I apologise in advance. Has the health and safety policies been adopted by this council from the previous council? And I mean formally adopted, or were they just assumed to be adopted when the new council was formed in May?
Daniel,
Just,
I don't know if you want
just-
to answer that one.
Yeah, I'm happy to, sorry. There was a formal decision made by the joint work stream leads, sorry, the word is title escaped me. The joint work stream leads for workforce, so that was Alison North and Chris Squire, agreed that the county council's legacy policies as a continuing authority would supersede all district policies, and therefore we would use them, as I said at the start of the presentation, as a baseline, but would do a comparison against the district policies, which I believe to be a similar process to what HR have followed.
That hasn't answered my question, and I repeat what I said. Has there been a formal adoption of the health and safety policies? Because as far as I know, the only two bodies that can do a formal adoption of anything is one is the executive and the other is the full council. And if the answer is no, I don't have a problem. I just want to be told that.
So I think the term of continuing authority will be determined by the Secretary of State when he put through the statutory instruments were that the county council would be continuing authority and all policies would be carried across. So I think until we've reviewed the policies, then the existing county council policies remain in place without continuing authority of that statutory instrument.
Thank you. I know Alan wants to come in.
Just to confirm exactly that, the statutory instrument does confirm all of those policies, and if there were amendments to those, they were considered by the LGR programme board and amended through this process. But of course, that's why you have a forward plan in front to be able to add to what David's just outlined. The forward plan is to set out the schedule of review as part of that process, so you can interrogate that to your content, really. But that was the original purpose.
For Henry's benefit, when we've done policies before, which weren't health check, but they were HR general policies, we compared all the district policies and looked to take the best way forward.
I get that.
That has happened already, and this is just a continuing process, isn't it, of updates, really? Kind of constant forever. Thank you.
Is that sufficient answer, Henry?
It was formally adopted by the Secretary of State. It does make it very difficult to call this a new council.
We all know that,
Okay.
we accept that.
Right. Okay, let's go. Yes, but
Are we asking questions on the policies?
no, we're going to get that. I'm very Daniel to introduce the policies, and then we'll have questions on them specifically. So back to you, Daniel, to introduce the policies.
Thank you. How would you like me to proceed in introducing the policies from the policy report? I'm just thinking they're reasonably lengthy documents, about 6-7 pages each, and there's around 7 of them.
If you can just give us an overview and then answer any specific questions. A short
Absolutely.
overview of the whole block, really, and then we'll answer the questions. It may be that there are policies that people do not want to spend a lot of time interrogating, so.
That's fine. There were 3 requests coming to the HR committee today. So there was a request to approve the statement of intent, noting that effectively the leader of the council and our chief executive officer, Duncan Sharkey, have already signed the statement of intent due to its statutory significance. It was done, I believe, on the 31st of March, so it was in place for vesting day. However, that hasn't been through the HR committee process, and we are committed to the process. So we wanted to bring that round, even though it's been published and is being referred to. So that was one request. Then request to approve the other policies that have been brought to your attention today. And then before I sort of quickly go through those, there was a separate request to approve delegated authority to the health and safety unit for the development of guidance and maintenance of that guidance. I've outlined in the report as to why we've made that request, but effectively it's to allow us flexibility in making changes to what is guidance. So beyond the statement of intent, we have the working at height policy. Broadly speaking, we have identified no significant changes from the continuing authorities policy, but we did look at the policy arrangements within the predecessor district councils. And I can say with all certainty that by far the most detailed was the current policy. And that's around working safely at height. So all of our policies really focus, as I in the report, we've removed the guidance, the subjective elements, and we focused on responsibilities of the council, responsibilities of our senior directors, senior managers, the health and safety team within the organisation. That's the layout of our policies. We have the safety action notice policy. Again, broadly speaking, no significant change.
Sorry, just a second, Daniel. Yes, Dave.
Sorry, is it worth checking if there's any questions before we move on? Otherwise, we're going to get to the end of the sixth and we're going to go back to them again.
Yeah, I think we'll both do it that way. I think Brandon, we should do it that way around. That's only fine.
So,
Okay, so the first one, which is I've got two incompatible lists here. So what was the first policy? Working
Statement of intent.
Do we have any questions on the statement of intent? to Start off with. No? Yes.
My only question
Mandy.
with that is it was signed in March and we have had an HR committee between March and now. I'm just wondering if it's like just another meeting to get this. Quite a long time.
That's because.
Yeah, I can
I can answer that. It's because the package
respond to
of
that if you'd like.
policy wasn't signed off in time to get onto the last meeting. That was not signed off in time by me. So that's why. So no questions on the statement of intent. So then it's working safely at height. Yes. Do we have any questions on that? Yes. Dave.
On page 20, is what it's 26. Using the word ensure in many documents, especially the legalities and the practicality of it. There's a line both within working at height and working in confined spaces that says that the service manager will ensure all staff who work at height are fit to do so, which strikes me as being almost impossible to do so unless you're doing medical checks or something at the foot of every ladder every time somebody goes up a tree. There is no way of ensuring that somebody at all times is fit to do their role. I think it's absolutely right within the policy that we're asking staff to report if they have any medical issues. But we're basically taking legal accountability for something that we have no feasible way of knowing whether somebody is fit to work at a point in time and could be up at the bottom of the ladder, but by the time they get to the top of the ladder, be having a TIA or anything, God forbid not. But it just strikes me, looking for assurance really from our legal colleagues, that we're not ensuring something which is to make certain something that we physically can't.
Yep, no, that's a reasonable question. Daniel, sorry, anyone else?
I would say that we've the word ensure is probably used quite regularly within our policies. The policy statement of intent is obviously the overarching policy. I like to view the statement of intent as somewhat like the Health and Safety at Work Act itself, with many regulations sitting underneath. When you look at what the HSE would view as being a suitable policy, then the statement of intent is integral, and then you have the arrangements. And within the statement of intent itself, we refer to the term so far as is reasonably practicable. And that is explained within the policy report itself as well. So I'd say that that is a bit of a qualifying remark, that we can only do what is as reasonably possible, practicable, sorry.
Sorry, can I ask, is that a caveat that applies to this? I mean, I was going to say the legal words are as far as reasonably practical. Those are the sort of words you should put in. But you're saying there's a caveat generally to these policies that covers this. Are you?
Yeah, I think I've articulated that within the policy report itself, and it is stated within the statement of intent.
Thank you. Alan?
Sure, if I may, there is I'm at this late, so my apologies, members, but there is a need to kind of review the use of ensure. I think as part of that position, as Daniel's outlined, it's perfectly reasonable and appropriate to use the word ensure in health and safety policy. It's kind of usual practice and those types of statements. When it comes to the law, it's reasonable and practical steps taken in order to, as Daniel's just outlined, what we probably need to do as part of the review of the statement of intent. So it would be reasonable to approve, in my opinion, based upon the law statement, but there is reason, I think, to reflect on those words on every single statement to ensure they have the right impact in the right places. and where appropriate, potentially reflect on reasonable and practicable as a more appropriate approach. The issue then is the kind of how do you then deal with proportionality and make those judgments, but of course hopefully the health and safety training takes account of that. Again, the policy is sufficient for the purposes of ensuring that we have a statement of intent in place. However, we do need to consider the use of reasonable and practical as part of any review.
Yeah, thank you. But clearly a lot of this is based on common sense, isn't it? I mean, I understand, and quite rightly so, the council, like any other formal body, has a duty of care to the employees, but the employee also has a duty of care to the employer, which is if you get somebody that's going to go up a scaffold and be silly, possibly within drinking or whatever, that's down to them. No organisation can be held responsible legally for that. Where we're coming from, I think, if I've got this right through you, Chair, is looking at the whys and wherefores of what happens if, and the council's covered every aspect to say, you know, we've been responsible, but you cannot be responsible for somebody that's going to be irresponsible. If that makes sense.
Sorry.
I spent 8 years writing health and safety policies in the most dangerous industry in the UK, which is on the railways. I've covered all of this. I have been involved in a number of health and safety inquiries, and what you are trying to do here is to ensure that your organisation doesn't get prosecuted. So if you're trying to do that, what you have to do is get the employee to sign a document that says, I am medically fit to do the job I'm expected to do. With that bit of paper, the health and safety will say, it's not your responsibility. Anything beyond that, you're going way beyond what you need to go to actually achieve what the 1974 Act says. All right, and that's got to add not only Mark's common sense, but actually what the law is you're trying to avoid being prosecuted for, if that makes also some sort of sense. Just so you know, I was involved in an incident where a rail broke a guy both legs of one of the workers on the ground. And my operator who did it wasn't prosecuted because he was not responsible for being where that man was. And as Mark has actually said, the guy was where he was told not to be. And he'd gone there and it was his own responsibility.
Along a similar theme is where within this is the employee's responsibility. I wanted to say that to councils. My second question was around a lot of this includes third-party contractors, which will be their staff as well. But a lot of the wording then says managers must ensure that risk assessments are carried out for all working at height, blah, blah, blah. Presumably, every one of those we ask our third-party contractors to do, and how do we know that they've done it?
That's one.
So, which the first,
That's point you made.
the first point was coming back to
Where's the employee's responsibility?
where's the employee's responsibility?
Page 5.
I'm just coming back to this comment that was made here.
So,
On page 5.
okay, so do we need another answer to that? Not, Daniel, the question about third parties and their employees and how we ensure that they have met these criteria. Do you have an answer on that?
Suggest it's quite challenging to make sure that all of our contractors have risk assessments in place. We are doing quite a piece of work, contractor verification at the moment, but where contractors have been appointed, then the appointing employee from Somerset Council should have confidence that they've got appropriate measures in place. But effectively, we're not legally responsible for the quality of the risk assessments completed by third-party contractors.
Chair, if I may as well, to add to what Daniel's just said, of course, as part of any procurement process. So, for example, if we take highways, a service that I'm familiar with, they will have to submit a corporate health and safety policy and also ensure that risk assessment statements are complete as part of their work. That's to ensure their own compliance. Daniel's absolutely right. The liability rests with the contractor, and clearly we need to ensure that they have the right policies and procedures in place as part of any procurement exercise. But that would be where the liability starts and stops. However, it's important as part of any design of scheme, for example, in a highway circumstance, that they complete that health and safety folder and random checks are completed by the service as part of that work, for example.
I made that. Covered. By leaving it to them.
That's correct.
Just going back to the bit about fits to do so. So you've got the employers having to report, employees having to report any illness, medical condition, etc. that may prevent them working out safely. You've got us saying we're going to ensure they're fit to do so, which is the most important of those really, because you do want somebody to tell you if they get dizzy when they go up at heights, you know, and that you expect hopefully they do that. And I think ensure they're fit to do so means you haven't got a particular reason why you can't work at height, have you? You know, all things being equal, most people could go up a ladder, but if you've got something that's going to make you feel dizzy or make you feel unbalanced, then you might not do it. So I do think those are quite stark statements actually looking at them. I mean, the employee is supposed to tell you, but it's supposed to tell you if they've got anything. We can't ensure, unless they tell us, we can't ensure that they're safe to work at height. So, but again, maybe the caveats that are in the way we work and about what you're expected to do, maybe that deals with that. I think it may be quite a difficult one to agree, but to ensure everybody's fit to do so is just or I would probably say ensure all staff who are not specifically unfit, you know, so in other words, you wouldn't put somebody up there if they were specifically unfit to do it. That if you were trying to protect your staff, we won't ask anybody to go up a ladder who might feel a bit dizzy when they got up there or doesn't like height or whatever. Just thought.
Yeah, I take on board what Sarah is saying, but with the greatest respect, you know, an employer has a duty of care as well. The employer. So if you've got somebody, if I may, just, you know, somebody's grand. So an employee goes to work, he's been drunk the night before, he's feeling very heady. To answer your question, is he fit to operate? He says to the person in question, the site agent, the site foreman, yes, I am. Goes up the ladder, gets on top of the ladder, has a bit of a wobbly, like you say, and collapses. Whose fault is that? It's not the employer's fault. It's the employee's fault for actually telling an untruth. He wasn't fit for work. He said he was fit for work. So from a legal standing, you can go to court. The person wouldn't have a leg to stand on because he actually caused the problem. If I've got that right.
Yeah, it's not important. I understand. Forget the ladder. No, I'm not going to say that.
I think we might want to sort of put a pin in the ensure issue for the moment,
Yeah.
partly because it comes up in lots of other
Yeah.
policies. And if we get bogged down in it now, we're not going to get through anything. But we'll come back to that at the end and look at what we're going to do
I
about
think
it.
that's it, you might need to do it that way.
Yeah. Okay, but apart from that particular issue, is there anything else on the working safely at height? No. That brings us to the safety action notice. Obviously. Any issues on?
Thank you. So the safety action notice policy is based on the continuing authorities policy at the same title. The policy relates to the health and safety services powers of enforcement within the council. So effectively, where we identify a significant risk to the safety of staff, employees, members of the public, elected members, then we are able to intervene to potentially put a prohibition notice in place, which would cease the activity or the use of a particular piece of equipment until such time as we've received the necessary reassurances, and an improvement notice also. The policy outlines an appeal process for that, and within the appendices there are various documents to make sure that we follow a formal procedure. There are no significant changes from the continuing authorities policy, other than potentially the fact we've introduced appendices, so that there's a more structured approach to the application of the enforcement.
Thank you, Daniel. Any questions? Mark, and then David.
Yeah. Sorry, thank you. I know I'm being a bit vocal, Chairman, through you, but I think it's very important because what's coming on every one of these reports is the same thing. If I make a quote on page, I think it's 3, contract owners work ensure that contractors under control to undertake work for the council do so in a safe manner, complying with relevant council policies, procedures and processes. Any unsafe factors are to be reported to the relevant CHO for address. So it's the same thing throughout every one of these processes, Chairman. Through you.
Yeah. It's a fair point. Shall we come back to that?
Yeah, just observation.
That's right. Well, we may want to discuss it at the end, but we'll park that as one of the issues that we're going to talk about.
I just wanted to say, is this, I mean, for example, is this if we found black concrete in the building, they'd issue one of these and say you can't work in there, too dangerous? Or is this just a minor thing like when trucks factories, you might crack a finger off? I don't really know when you'd use something like this.
When would these come into play, Daniel? Can you give us some examples, perhaps a large one and a small one?
So the rack's a fair example, but I would say that we always look to work closely with our colleagues and collaboratively as much as we possibly can. And I'm sure if we identified rack in one of our buildings, we would work with Oliver Woodhams and his colleagues to make sure that immediate action was taken. And I wouldn't necessarily foresee that there would be a need to issue a SAN, because generally it's when there's been a contravention of our health and safety policies or standard practices. So an example of a SAN that we've issued, we issued an improvement safety action notice against Scientific Services in 2022 due to several breaches of health and safety policy, lack of hazardous substance risk assessments, and a few other issues there. In terms of prohibition notices, I think the last one we may have issued was at the Hillside Library, where we prevented the use of the car park due to concerns of vehicle collision with pedestrians due to an inadequate walkway.
Henry?
Nowhere in here that I can find, I'm willing to stand directed, does it actually say what happens when an employee reports a manager for unsafe behaviour. There is nowhere in here that I can see that you have a Network Rail and the other big companies that I was operating with have a non-disclosure telephone line so that employees can actually ring up and say, my manager lives the same, so has done this without leaving their name. Now, it is bloody difficult for an employee to complain either about the contractor that's paying for him or employing him, or a member of this council to complain about the direct manager in a way that identifies them as an individual. And it needs to be put in here, in my opinion, somewhere, that there is either a non-disclosure system or a telephone number which is anonymous, whereby an employee can actually say, the bloody idiot man told me to climb that tree. I cut the limb off, the limb and me hit the floor. I didn't complain because nothing was broken.
Thank you, Henry. I mean, David has whispered to me that that's probably in the whistleblowing policy, which is, I'm sure, correct. Having said that, it would not necessarily be the worst idea in the world to highlight what people should do if they feel that these policies are being breached in the policies themselves, so that when you look it up and find out there's a problem, there's a little box at the bottom saying see whistleblowing policy or phone this number or what have you. That change we could make.
The other thing that I always used to have in my policies, which was disciplinary action, also includes termination of employment. It shows people how seriously you are taking health and safety.
Okay, that's one to look into. That gets slightly more complicated, but yes, David.
So, just talk about contractors. So were you able to use this policy to put a SAN on a contractor who's directly working for us? What if their own policies are in conflict to that? Their own policies say that it's a safe working process. We've accepted their working processes. And yet we've tried to put a safety notice on that. Where do we stand there? Where's the sort of arbitration of contractors?
My viewpoint would be that as the client, which is a construction term within the construction design management regulations, as the client, we are ultimately responsible for the works. And there are some caveats within the regulation. Obviously, if we do our due diligence, for example, then the day-to-day management of an activity would sit and liability would sit with the contractor. But effectively, we have responsibilities to make sure the management arrangements are working and the works are completed safely. So as the client under the construction design management regulations, if we felt that they weren't being undertaken safely, then we would be absolutely within our right to prohibit the continuation of those works until further reflection had taken place to discuss the particular issue.
Okay, anything else on safety action notice policy? See anyone? The new and expectant parents policy.
The new and expectant parents policy again is similar, broadly speaking, with no significant alterations to the requirements of the current continuing authorities policy, although there has been a lot of changes to the wording in accordance with changes made within HR policy around the terminology used to describe what has traditionally been new and expectant mothers. Then we have aligned with our colleagues in HR and made that more inclusive with the term of new and expectant parents.
Questions, Mandy?
Yeah, I found this, the wording is quite cold actually, if you expect it, I think it's condition. But I have a few questions really. First of all, new and expectant parents are encouraged to inform their employer of their condition at the earliest possible opportunity. I know most expectant parents actually won't tell anybody. So when is it expected? When they're saying at the earliest possible opportunity, most I don't think would do that, and I wouldn't want them to do that. They want to get over that first 12 weeks. The second one actually is around breastfeeding. It talks about finding a place for them to rest. But I would actually like to see breastfeeding be available anywhere in a building. They don't have to go to a place to do it. I'm totally be encouraging that, comfortable with that process. And my third question was around, I think it says that you should tell somebody if you've had a baby within the last 6 months. Well, I would hope that any manager would have spotted it if they've had a child in the last 6 months, and should tell them that that they're breastfeeding now, as soon as practically possible. Now, if you're at home and you are on leave, I wouldn't be expecting to ring my manager and let him know immediately that I'm breastfeeding. And I would hope that there would be sort of a return to work. It happened to me when I had children, and return to work interview that you would actually cover these sorts of things. So I just felt quite uncomfortable with a lot of the process within this policy, having been there myself a few years ago. I'll just put that out on the table. I think a lot of things here will be covered hopefully elsewhere.
I would.
Yes, Daniel.
Sorry, Phil. I would say that where we've used the words encourage, effectively, we are only legally responsible for the safety of that employee from a pregnancy perspective. When we're informed that they're pregnant, we must consider generically around the fact that workers of childbearing age potentially could be pregnant, but effectively we need to have more robust measures in place, which is the application of a specific risk assessment for that individual at the point they inform us. If they don't inform us in writing, then legally we're not required to initiate that process. Obviously, you would hope that we would address it, you know, as due diligence from a manager, if he hasn't been or she hasn't been told. Once, obviously, maybe it became a little bit more obvious that the individual was pregnant. The breastfeeding one isn't something that we've previously had any feedback on. And to tell somebody breastfeeding, I think that the manager or the employee, when they return to work, might read the policy. So there would be a return to work meeting, and actually it might be the wording within the document that actually prompts that conversation.
It would be nice to have seen that when we discussed that, a sort of return to work. And, you know, I'm not seeing anything here that actually encourages it openly as a council, which would have been nice to see. So,
So which bit of the page are we on? The bit
oh,
about location of breastfeeding. I'm trying to.
Yeah.
so it says provide suitable facilities, including providing a space for pregnant and breastfeeding parents to rest. But I just would have expected within the policy, you know, a promotion of this where people can, and for us to be encouraging of it where people can or are able to breastfeed that even can. But I think that any sense of that within the policy would be nice to see it.
Separate policy, HR policy on breastfeeding.
I was just having a quick look, actually. It's in, I think it's included in the maternity policy, but I'm just double checking for you. And it may be that there needs to be the link between the two.
I think we should encourage it on time. Encourage people back to work.
Sorry.
Yes.
There's another example where we just need to cross-check these policies and indicate to people that they should read this policy in conjunction with another policy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's absolutely correct. But we just bear in mind that this is very much just from the health and safety rather than any of the other.
But as an employee, you want to
You
want to have the total picture, and therefore you don't have to go off searching for different policies. We can connect them as much better.
We, if I could come in on that point, we have tried to connect those dots in the sense that our HR colleagues do attend the LGR JNF group, so at some stage they may have seen them, but also our wellbeing colleagues attend the health safety wellbeing steering group, so it would have been captured in the consultation, and the equalities in employment officer would have seen both policies also as part of the equality impact assessment.
Sorry.
If it would help committee members, then I'm happy to circulate the or send through Laura possibly to, you can circulate. We've got breastfeeding at work guidance, and I can also send the maternity policy, so you can see what's in both, which hopefully may give you the reassurance that you're seeking, as well as the cross link in there. Yeah. Okay.
If the member staff goes looking and sees this, they won't have a sense of those other elements which are really important.
Yes, I do think this is about health and safety, not about encouraging breastfeeding particularly. I think it's about how to be safe at work. I just wanted to say where it says on page 45, management will ensure that the only expected parents are encouraged to inform their employer, of their condition. Why are there commas there? Inform the employer of their condition at the earliest possible opportunity. You don't need any commas there. It doesn't make any sense. It rather looks like you're talking about the employer's condition.
I'm sure we'll change that without context. Anything else on that one? Okay. Daniel, confined spaces.
Thank you. The confined spaces policy is a entirely new policy to the organisation, something that in particular would apply to our predecessor Sedgemoor and Somerset West and Taunton district councils, and therefore colleagues from both organisations work together to write the policy to ensure that we have effective arrangements as required by the confined spaces regulations, but it is an entirely new policy.
Any questions, David?
Two things. So, noting the risks. The fact of supply explosion, loss of consciousness, asphyxiation, drowning. I just wonder if something relating to electrocution or something should also be in there as well, because that's often within a confined space. Then the second one is, whenever I've seen confined spaces working policies, it's always talked about double locks, double procedures to ensure that people can go into confined space, but also return from that. You know they're in and you know they're out. I'm not seeing that in here. Is that a specific working procedure that would be elsewhere?
Yeah, yes, I think that we, in the email that went across to Democratic Services, we outlined that the guidance documents were available via a link, and I'm fairly certain, David, that the guidance for the confined spaces policy does capture about lock off.
Yeah,
we'd need to double check that though.
Okay, because I mean, that is one of the biggest safety things you can have is a double lock.
Yeah, if you can check that and check it now, it's fantastic. If not, you can check it
Yeah.
and get back to us. That'd be very helpful, Daniel. And also the electrocution point.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fairly certain that the definition of confined space would have been a direct copy from the health and safety executive's description definition, but I will follow that up.
Could we add electrocution on as a potential foreseeable specified risk, or?
We could. I would just have to look at the wording, because if we've described it as specified, then that will be because it's specified by the health and safety executive.
Okay, yeah, if you can check that one, well, it's confirmed with us either way. Okay. Henry.
There were in this document that talk about qualifications, it talks about training, it talks about making sure people are trained to do the operation. It doesn't put upon the employee that they need to ensure that they are qualified to be working in that particular position. And I'm going to quote one which probably won't arise in this council, but underwater confined spaces is a majorly requirement for qualifications. And it needs, in my opinion, to be put in here. You can train them all you like, but if they don't pass the qualification, you will end up being blamed.
Where do we stand on qualifications, Daniel?
We'll have to quickly check the policy.
Whilst you're doing that.
As I said earlier, the object of this policy is to ensure you don't end up in court.
Next.
Just to say, you've got two things in page 5, you've got at the top corporate and then you're trading it a bit further down, you've got the same point. In bullet point 4 at the bottom of the same.
Which one do you want to remove there?
The second one, I think.
Remove the second one.
I think that we've probably not necessarily mentioned qualified exactly, but there is 6 references to suitable and sufficient training.
I got that, but that won't protect you in court. If you've got a statement which says this gentleman or this lady was qualified to do this work and I saw her tickets or his tickets, you are protected in court. If you say, I think she had the training and I don't have proof of it, where are you going to be when you go to court? There's only one sentence to be added.
That's fine.
An amendment that we think we could make?
Yes.
An amendment that wouldn't cause any problems with consultation?
No.
No. Fine. Are we happy to make an amendment to ensure that workers working in confined spaces are suitably qualified? Yes, yeah, we will do that.
I obviously, working at height and various other.
It could be for absolutely everything.
Yes, it's
So, and then that's when you get to the question of under what circumstances you can specifically reference
That
that.
really goes into the statement, Ted.
The point that I was trying to bring up about working in confined spaces is it's considerably more dangerous than working at height. The people get killed working in confined spaces where they only normally break things working at height. And if you want to protect yourself, you've got to make sure that they, and I fully agree with having the qualifications of anybody who has been through H&S training will have a ticket, and I can produce you my railway tickets if you want me to. They're in my car. That I actually have to show Network Rail before I go on any of their sites when I sign in that I am fit to operate.
But it says it, and Henry, is cooperate with any training requirement and use the equipment supplied properly. So you're saying cooperate with any training requirement to prove that. Training
And they are
is
carrying a qualification that qualifies them to use that equipment. If you've got breathing apparatus, all right, which is not uncommon in confined spaces, and you don't know how to use it, and you get caught with CO2, as an example, somebody lets off a fire extinguisher when you're going to die of asphyxiation. Who is going to be blamed if they haven't actually checked it will qualify to use that breathing apparatus?
I think we've previously addressed that point with skills, knowledge and experience within our policies. If you would like us to make a specific change to it, then we will.
Yeah, I think we're happy to add in a specific change to cover qualification. Anything else on confined spaces? Okay, so that brings us to working outside in the sun with extremes of heat and cold policy. The extremes of temperature.
So this particular policy is somewhat of an evolution of the continuing authorities policy for sun protection, the sun protection policy. As part of the review, we recognise that actually all of the organisations didn't have particularly well documented requirements for staff that are working outside. So the welfare regulations would absolutely protect an employee and have suitable arrangements, and we have a welfare policy, but that's really focused on adequate temperatures and arrangements within, you know, a corporate building perhaps, or one of our educational establishments. So therefore we extended the reach of the sun protection policy to make sure it had additional focus on protecting employees from the extremes of heat and cold.
Again, I'm going to be consistent, Chairman, if you don't mind. Again, this is all based on, you know, pure logic to me and understanding. I mean, it says here the manager will ensure. So the managers on behalf of the council give the information out. And again, if the employee or the contractor decides to go against that, that is down to them again. This whole thing carries the same thing, like Henry pointed out about, are you specifically qualified to do it? And I think, you know, I'm back in the council here, by the way, not the other side. I think you can only set so many stuff out in black and white, which is down to the individual, whether they take note of it. As I think it's Henry's words, if it goes to the court of law, you've made it in black and white, they've done some particulars. They're going to lose the claims, simple as that. So I feel that, you know, the committee is doing a really good job there, strengthening some of the concerns. I think it's really good. But again, the wording is specific around the council.
One of the most common enforcements by the Health and Safety Executive on employers is failure to apply adequate, suitable and sufficient supervision. And I understand the comments that you're making about potential gross misconduct of an employee or where an employee is at fault, but effectively there are scenarios where the council would still be prosecuted regardless of the employee's role in it because of the failure to provide adequate supervision. So it's just a point for consideration with some of the wording within the policies.
Two things. First of all, I can't see anywhere in here, but I may have missed it, where we provide water, particularly in hot, very hot conditions. Is that not a responsibility to provide access to water? And the second one is, can you just clarify for me where we stand? I know we academies, we don't have that responsibility. Where do we stand in terms of schools and school children who become our responsibility when they cross threshold? And do we have the same? They're not mentioned within here. And is that because they're not? I know they're not employees, but they surely have similar rights.
So on the first question, David, under manager responsibilities, we have sufficient breaks, shelter and accessible cold drinking water and hot drinks are provided.
Is that, yeah? Where is that?
That was under manager responsibilities. Praise the person that invented control and F function. We have an additional appendix which does provide some guidance. So the HS, when we reviewed this particular policy, the HSE's guidance is very, very good, and they have their own website page dedicated to workplace temperature. So for this particular policy, we did decide to promote the HSE guidance, but in doing so, there was some school specific guidance that was promoted. So we've got volume 4 of the school guidance for schools. There's a sun protection document in there, guidance document, and then there's some additional guidance there on guided walks and outdoor activities.
Sorry, Chairman, I'm going to be a bit silly now, if you don't mind, because I think you've got it.
Mind a bit, but carry on.
Thank you, that's good. And when I say silly, I mean it's not silly. So if that's the case, then where the council's got a duty of care to either elected members or staff, can I ask you where the water is on this table then for people on the sub?
It's not that hard.
But the thing is, if it was cold, we'd all get the cup of coffee.
There are kitchens and
Yeah.
such available within the building.
I did set myself a question, Chairman, forgive me.
And I said I minded a little bit. Right, anything else on the screens of heat? No? Okay, thank you. So is that the water assets policy next?
The water assets policy is also an entirely new policy for the council. Again, our colleagues in Somerset Western Taunton predecessor organisation and Sedgemoor identified the need for a water assets policy for the new council, as we do have staff that work near and occasionally on water, and on reflection, actually sometimes our rights of way staff do. So it was a fair comment to say that we needed a policy.
Daniel, do you have any questions on the water assets policy? No? Okay, thank you very much, which brings us to the final policy, which is the HSO7 biological agent infection control and bloodborne viruses policy.
And that again is a continuation of the continuing authority as policy, the bloodborne viruses policy, although we retitled it infection control and bloodborne viruses, but a quick reference search of the continuing policy, the infection control is mentioned within the document several times. So I'd say there's been no significant change to that policy.
Any questions, Faye?
Yeah, just really around how long the policy was when it was readopted, because obviously the public health policy and public health approach to particularly contagious diseases and some others have changed slightly in the last few years. So has this been through a public health review, or was the policy that was adopted at vesting very current and has already been through that?
Good question. How old was the original policy?
So I know categorically that my colleague Steve Dorrell did consult public health at length when he last reviewed the policy. What page are we on now?
We are on page 72.
Infection control and bloodborne viruses. The policy was last updated on the 1st of January 2022. And I believe that my colleague Francesca Benson also consulted public health, but they worked quite closely with Steve during the 2022 review of the policy, which is obviously post-COVID.
I haven't been looked at since January 2022.
It's not been looked at in depth since January 2022.
So it would have as part of this review. So the review process is an in-depth review, and there could have been changes that were made, but they weren't considered significant in the context of the impact on the employees, for example. But it's not a simple change of the date when we look at the policies.
Okay, thank you. Mandy.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the key messages on this one. It says, adequate training set to provide for any activity where an employee may be exposed to any sort of biological agent. I'm struggling a little bit. It talks about Legionella. Well, surely that would come under, you know, our premises and Legionella testing. I don't sort of quite know why it's here, because an employee wouldn't be able to tell whether there's Legionella in water, and neither would their manager. You've got to rely on the access team. And then we're talking about tuberculosis and biohepatitis, and again, I wouldn't class them as biological agents. So I'm just wondering about the words here, and when's a biological agent? Is TB a biological agent? I wouldn't think that it is. What's it? Is it?
I think it is, but also keep you aware that I'm not qualified to say what is leading to biological agent.
Right. But with Legionella, surely that would be covered within our health and safety building as opposed to.
Well, is it also-
manager.
Is it also?
Yeah, it's open, but then it's just been.
Surely it's up to the manager to make sure the employee doesn't go into a building that has got Legionnaires
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah.
And that would then be covered by this policy.
Some of our employees have to go into buildings with Legionnaires
And
problems.
they should be wearing the correct health and safety.
Yeah.
And the manager should ensure that.
That's what's not, that's the bit that I would expect to be in here as opposed to.
So is the Tottenham Scientific Services reviewed this as well in the company? Because they're the guys who are dealing with the testing for some way.
I think the other group of people that would be very kept by this would be school nurses as well. But there's probably some key groups of employees that we're just going to be comfortable that they've all signed this off.
So scientific services and school nurses, Daniel.
I would say that as part of the consultation, Theo, public health have multiple representatives on the health, safety, wellbeing steering group.
Okay. But we won't necessarily specifically have picked up all of those.
No, I think that we can add scientific services as the subject matter experts that we would consult as part of the policies going forward. But broadly, personally, quite comfortable with the content of the policy.
And how does it apply to first aiders?
How does it apply to first aiders, Daniel?
Is it mentioned first aiders within the policy? You'll have to forgive me. I don't write every policy.
No, understand. Don't worry, it's the last one, Daniel.
I don't think we mentioned first aid within the policy. I take a pragmatic approach that when we review the first aid policy, if we identify relevance to the policies, then all of the guidance documents that have been shared with you have useful links where we try to connect the policies. So that's where we would do so. Although I note from the conversations we had earlier, there are occasions where we may need to directly link within the policies, as we've agreed today with the new and expectant parents one and linking with the HR policies.
Sorry.
Just doing a quick search. First aid is mentioned once in the statement of intent.
Thank you, sorry.
Right, anything else you want to pick up on this? Policy yesterday.
It might just be because I can't spell the word asbestos when I'm searching for it, but it was, you know, that's something that would normally fall in. There's probably something that our staff are likely to come across much more often than Legionella or
Excited.
Was that asbestos for you?
Yeah,
Asbestos is a natural fibre, and we've got a specific policy on asbestos.
okay,
And you wouldn't find asbestos mentioned within our hazardous substances policy either, because it's got its own set of regulations.
okay, fine, no, thank you, I think that answers my, yes, Mandy.
Just to pick up, we've had a lot of instances today where we've said it's covered in another policy. I'm just wondering whether in all the HR papers, there can be a link to the other policies. We must have hundreds. And my other question was, we've got a couple of policies here that weren't with some of the councils and were with the other. So not all councils have them previously. We've done that review. I mean, the question is, and the challenge is, do we need every policy that we've got? And does every council have every policy? And if there are, the other question is, are there some that none of the districts ourselves have before, i.e. are there policies we're not aware? So it's just that piece of policy work. How we solve the better screen, make sure that we're missing anything.
The unknown.
So we don't have any particular issue with this policy or any of the other ones that we haven't covered, do we? That one, no, I'm going to come back to the sort of more sort of wider point this evening, is that one. Now, I just want to make sure there weren't any specific points in anything that we missed. So I've got three items to deal with here. I've got the issue of the word ensure, which I think we want some assurance that about the meaning of the word ensure and whether it's caveated, whether it ought to be caveated. I think that's something we would like something to come back up to us either at the next meeting or perhaps before.
May I make a proposal for you?
Yeah, you may.
How about if we change it to something along the lines of the manager will take reasonable action to ensure?
Chair, if I may, I think the easiest thing to do is take that particular point away and take some advice in relation to the use of ensure and the legal requirement to take steps that are reasonably practicable and ensure that those things are reasonable and that the use of the word is appropriate, and we can provide some advice to members on that. I think making changes potentially on the fly could give rise to other consequential effects. I completely understand why Daniel would suggest that, but I just would be concerned, having just scanned through the policies at speed, again, that there are consequences of making that changes. So I think we just need to bring back some advice on that particular point.
I agree with that.
Second reference is questions that we've had saying they're covered by the statement of intent. So can I just check that legally, you know, if an event was to happen and we went back to your policy, legally, could we say, well, it's not there, but it's actually covered in the statement? And why could you legally convince them?
Daniel, I would defer through you, Chair. I defer to you to just confirm that the statement of intent is as I understand, the overarching piece of policy, and then everything else feeds from that and is guided by it. Is that right?
Absolutely. The leader of the council and our chief executive officer have outlined the arrangements for managing health and safety within the organisation and signed that statement of intent. And as I described it before, it effectively becomes a bit of an enabling master policy. Within the eyes of the health and safety executive, there is a requirement for us to have that statement of intent in place, and then to have arrangements for managing our hazards and risks associated with our operations, which is what the subordinate policies effectively are, as their other arrangements.
And Chair, through you, I think probably what the committee, from the conversation I've overheard, it would appear appropriate to provide some guidance as to how all this hangs together. So effectively an overall statement, a small description for each of these elements that just provides that description of how the statement of intent informs other policies and how it all fits together. Would that be of use to committee?
This is to be read with the statement of intent, just so it's
Noted, Chair. Thank you.
So yes, I agree. I think we shouldn't rewrite the word ensure. We should get some advice on that, as Alan suggests, rather than doing something accidental. Then there's an issue around third-party contractors and whether this covers them or not, or how this relates to their own health and safety policies, which I still think the committee is a little bit unclear on, and I'd like us to get some guidance on that. Once again, either at the next meeting or preferably beforehand, just to assure us that that we as an organisation do know exactly what the answer to that is, and that we're crystal clear on to where the liability lies. Yes, David.
And I'm just like, no, are we explicit as we award contracts, advising that we have this facility to buy statutory notice? So we probably have to see their health and safety policies, but are we at the same time advising them that we can override that with our own health and safety policy? I think there is an unclear area there.
Chair, I think we'll take that away and provide again some specific bit of feedback in terms of both how that is procured and how action is taken during the execution of that piece of work.
And then
it should be written in the contract process when you're taking on a contractor, that what they sign should say that you have to abide by our health and safety policies, and they sign that document as part of the contractual process. Bang, end of story. It's not a health and safety issue, it's a contractual issue.
that's what we're to sure we check. Thank you. And then there's the issue of the policy of policies, our policy towards policies, how many policies we have, which policies we have, how we know which policies we ought to have, which policies we ought not to have.
No, that we've not known which one it is.
Yes. So what is the proposed process going forward, Daniel, in terms of managing our policies and how many policies we have and how we decide if we need new ones or don't need new ones?
So in terms of the policies that we've currently got, we came together as a sub work stream as part of the LGR work and identified additional policies that we needed at that point that aligned with the recommendations from the predecessor district council representatives that were working with us at the time. So that helped inform why we're bringing a couple of new policies to you today in terms of the water assets policy, confined spaces policy. Broadly speaking, we align our policy arrangements with other regulations. So it could be the regulatory reform fire safety order is why we've got a fire policy, asbestos control of asbestos regulations, why we have an asbestos policy. There are a couple of exceptions to that. For instance, we've got a slips, trips and falls policy, but that is a significant issue where we have a lot of incidents across the organisation. But we would like to do some engagement with the services. It's just in terms of our infancy as a new organisation, that becomes quite challenging at the moment. And as we go through the restructuring, it's going to be a lot easier to engage with colleagues at the right level within the organisation to do some risk scoping and identify potentially additional regulations that might apply in some areas that we've missed. So we are developing a plan for that.
Yes, Andy.
It'd be really easy actually to do a quick desktop benchmarking with a couple of councils. I think that would not be hugely onerous. We could just whip through and check we've got what we need. That's all. I'm not talking about lengthy piece of work, but it would just give you some reassurance that we've not missed some things that other councils.
I suggest that you benchmark against the more recent industries like Buckinghamshire.
They've done the work, we could help in that, sure.
That's something you can have a look at, Daniel.
Yes.
Thank you. Right. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of our items. That's anyone has anything else. So we now get to vote on the policies. So the members of the HR committee are asked to approve the Somerset Council Health and Safety Statement of Intent attached. Members are reminded that owing to the importance of the statutory requirements associated with document, Duncan Sharkey and Bill Evans signed document on the 31st of March. Policy is submitted for approval to ensure the H&S service has followed the council's process as much as reasonably possible. They've ensured they've done it as much as is reasonably possible. Approve the following policies: the safety action notices, fine spaces, new and expectant parents, working safely at height, biological agents, infection control of bloodborne viruses, water assets, working outside in the sun and extremes of heat and cold. And to agree to give delegated authority to corporate health and safety units publish and update guidance documents where necessary. We have a proposal for
Can I
that.
just be one pedantic question, sorry, approve the statement of intent, it's already been signed and agreed, so I'm amending it, it's not actually approving it, that's already, it's already been done by the planning, so I'm
We're approving it after the fact. I think that's what we're being asked to do. So, do we have a proposal for that? Sarah, and seconded by David, all those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Wonderful. That brings us on to item 6, update on HR matters. I'm down to introduce Sari Bryce, but Sari, are you going to introduce Dawn?
I'm delegating
Are you
to,
going to Alan?
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for the slight change to the running order. I thought it's helpful to just attend committee today, just to provide an update on some of the work that's going on across the workforce service, and particularly around restructuring. Also take the opportunity to introduce Dawn Betridge, who's our interim service director for workforce, and also talk about some of the priorities that Dawn will be focusing on in the initial period. So it seemed like a golden opportunity to introduce you today as part of that process. Also, I wouldn't mind just talking about some of the work we are doing to support the budget focus of the organisation, and particularly around vacancy management and the like. So first and foremost, those services that were directly affected by the local government reorganisation programme since vesting day, so principally those place-based services or corporate services are going through their restructuring as we speak. Each of those services are creating their business cases, ensuring that their structures are validated and going through the process. So in terms of community services, who are by far and away ahead of all other services, they are working through each of their service areas. So in particular around housing, culture, customers and customer contact, and of course in the regulatory and operational areas. There are no specific changes to those roles, moreover ensuring that they are appropriately evaluated and then recruitment processes going through. That will of course potentially result in some staff being unsuccessful, so they either go back into the recruitment pool or may exit the organisation depending on the approach that's taken. In terms of the active recruitment in that service area, there are the head of operations is going through that recruitment process at the moment. The strategic manager for customer insight and experience is going through the process, as well as a number of other roles. And then finally, the head of the regulatory service is currently open for expressions of interest. In terms of climate and place, a number of activities around climate, environment and sustainability, and also around economy, employment and planning. In terms of active recruitment, there are 4 roles currently going through the active recruitment process following job evaluation. They are the head of resilience and adaptation, head of climate and natural environment, head of waste and head of building control. And some of those posts since I wrote this update have already been recruited to and notifications issued. And then finally, the last 2, in terms of resources and recruitment, the finance procurement consultation, that's been extended, or was extended, sorry, to the 29th of September, just to include all of the relevant bits of feedback from staff, and particularly ensuring that the recruitment timelines for 3 key roles around head of procurement, risk and insurance were all advertised and then recruited to as part of that process. That all started in September. Finally, for my own service area, the business cases are being prepared with a view to get that completed by the 23rd of October. So that's around governance and legal, partnerships, workforce and localities, and strategy and performance. It is fair to say that the significant challenge with our strategy and performance area in particular, given the nature of some of the split roles that existed across a number of our authorities. So placing all of those staff in the right service areas proving to be a challenge. I would say that that's a systematic issue because we had a number of authorities that had split roles and posts that were often split 2, 3, even 4 times across different duties. So ensuring that those staff are appropriately consulted, rightly informed about some of those changes that's going through at the moment. So slightly behind where we wanted to be in terms of overall consultation, however, ensuring that we've got the right budgets in place, the right staffing numbers in place, and we provide staff the opportunities to understand where they fit in the wider organisation was important as part of that process. One of the key bits of work that we've just started in earnest really is to identify and ensure that we are carrying out I guess a re-verification of our vacancy control and our establishment control principles. It's something that through most LGR programmes tends to drift post-vesting day. There are a significant number of vacancies recorded in our SAP system. They are clearly not real. They are clearly there are clearly some significant issues. However, in order to provide not only an opportunity to consider whether those posts are still required in order to support the budget situation, clearly we will go through appropriate consultation and engagement regardless of whether those posts are occupied by a member of staff. However, it's important to make sure that we carry out a full review of that, bring back into control establishment principles, and then consider whether we have any of those vacancies that could reasonably support the budget situation. Please don't quote me, he says when he provides some detail. Currently, the SAP system is holding around 1,362 vacancies in the organisation. That is clearly incorrect and clearly inappropriate. So you can see why there's a significant piece of work to focus on verifying that number and find exactly how and where those vacancies are being considered. I'm sure some colleagues would be frowning somewhat at me quoting a direct number to the committee, but I think it's really important that we are transparent of the particular issue that we've got and why it's so important we bring this back into control. Again, not unusual as part of any LGR programme, particularly as establishment control tends to drift just prior to vesting day. So again, bringing back that discipline and verifying those numbers is of critical importance. Just in terms of some other final next steps, one of the elements that we will also be looking to do is reviewing the process around some of the policies and procedures associated with various matters, for example, recruitment protocol, redundancy procedures, suitable alternative employment, or require review and refreshing where appropriate, just to make sure that they are fit for purpose as we move through. We're about to go through this most significant level of restructuring across the organisation. It seems prudent to ensure that we have an appropriate review in place. It is likely that a number of those policies are still fit for purpose, but of course it's just prudent to carry out that review to make sure we have that in place, and particular as well, ensuring that we've got an opportunity to look at our recruitment protocol, again, to support particularly the budget position. And then finally, I just thought it helpful, to introduce Dawn Bettridge, our interim service director of workforce. Dawn joined us yesterday. Feels like a lifetime already because we've got so much work done. But as part of that process, we've established a series of key priorities, and I thought it helpful to share with committee today some of those priorities, sorry, if not all of those priorities. Clearly, they will change and adapt over time to flex with the needs of the organisation. So first and foremost, supporting our job evaluation process, ensuring that it remains robust and also reflects the number of jobs that will be required to go through that process, and ensuring that the administration of that is not only appropriate, but also gives the ability to consider those jobs at pace. Providing leadership and support to the ongoing restructuring of directorates and services. Again, that's helping and supporting the workforce service and giving that overview around some of those key policies and, more importantly, how procedures are executed. Reviewing the council's redeployment procedure, redundancy policy and protocol, again, for the reasons I've just outlined. I've just covered off the reasons around why vacancy management and establishment control are important, and I've asked Dawn to take a particular look at that to ensure that the right support to the team is in place, but also we're developing that across the council. Lead a review of the workforce service. Clearly, one of the opportunities we have with Dawn's expertise and experience, but also the wider expertise and experience across our workforce team, is to consider the appropriate structure and vision for the service moving forward, particularly around creating the right support for the organisation. And then finally, it seems only appropriate to draw on Dawn's experience at Birmingham Council, her previous assignment, just to consider where we have any particular tangible equal pay claim risk. We do not at this stage, following the initial assessment, but again, it would be prudent given Dawn's experience. Regrettably for Dawn, we've asked a particular view on that. So apologies for the lack of formal announcement that we were introducing Dawn to you today. That's on me. I do apologise, but it seemed like a golden opportunity to bring her today to both see how the committee worked, but also an opportunity to introduce you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Alan. Any questions, anyone? Andy?
Especially welcome, Dawn.
Thank you.
Got a nice challenge ahead of you, and I'm glad to hear, Alan, that we're assuming we can get through this, settling. They are very important. Just a question: are we in this time of uncertainty losing staff and we expecting that?
Through you, Chair, I anecdotally, it appears to be a mixed picture. I think one of the items that, and by that I mean in some areas we are seeing resignations being submitted, but I don't know whether that's a widespread issue. I think it's only right and proper. I'll probably bring a good update back to this committee to set out levels of change, what's being done to address that, and hopefully the restructuring process is part of that. But I would prefer not to kind of give an anecdotal view. I have a concern, personally, I have a concern that the lack of clarity around structures is uncertain for staff, and that's creating a move to kind of vote with one's feet. But let me take that away and get you a decent update with some numbers and some detail to that.
Fair, but we can give our staff. Second question. Yes.
Any other questions?
Chair, can I just, I'm just conscious because I've been very quiet and it's not like me to be so quiet. And thank you, Alan, and it's lovely to meet you all. So it was good to come in today and just see how the committee works. So yeah, I just wanted, sorry for the people sitting right down on the right hand side because I can't see very well. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself, it's nice to be back in the southwest. I've been working up in Birmingham for the last 10 months with Birmingham City Council, but I've been working in HROD for over 30 years and working as an interim HR director for the last 6. So some of the organisations I've worked with, I've been supporting the acting HR director for the last 10 months in Birmingham City Council. So I wasn't actually in the lead role, but I was supporting the team. Prior to that, I was at Hammersmith and Fulham as well for nearly 3 years, and had quite a wide portfolio there covering inclusion and transformation, co-production, equalities, as well as HR and OD. So I really look forward to being here. Obviously, I fully understand you've got some significant financial challenges and workforce challenges, and the two are very interlinked. So hopefully, in addition to sort of the list that Alan's needing me to look at pace, I'll be able to bring, to the organisation some transferable knowledge around, how we can ensure our workforce is sized right, fit for purpose, and supporting that in-year budgetary savings gap that is obviously a significant issue at the moment. So, but it's very good to join you. And as I say, it's day 2, so next time I'll probably have more to say.
Question though, so it came back to me. Saf, thank you for being open and honest about those sort of vacancy rates. For me, it's one doing that trawl through to find out what should and shouldn't be there, but I think the second piece of work is to work out how they were on SAP in the first place, and why the numbers are so high. I know we're upgrading. Didn't do anything with SAP. I mean, it's occurred because of reasons. It's not only getting the numbers right, but it's making sure you don't do the same thing again.
Through you, Chair, a really important point. One of the key issues is ensuring that as all the data transferred, so it's not just a management discipline point, that there is a data quality issue as well from each of those authorities. So I wouldn't kind of label it purely at a lack of discipline around the use of establishment control, moreover ensuring that data is in the right places. And of course, not only are we dealing with the situation of ensuring the data is right, we're also moving those individuals that are recorded in SAP in various different places, and say split roles are causing significant issues. So there are a number of contributory factors. The importance is verifying the number, ensuring we've got that number in place, and we know exactly where the gaps are, and particularly how things like funding or how particular posts are being used, and we have a reasonable number to then take from that.
Anyone else? No, in which case, welcome to all. Thank you very much for sitting to the meeting, listening. I'm sure you'll have a long list of things that need to change next time. But great to have you with us. Thank you all very much for your attendance and your contributions. I'll see you all soon.
Yeah.